What really happened? Your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. We're still unable to take phone calls while we try and figure out where our technical issue is. I'm just glad that my words can get out to you reasonably intelligible, on the assumption that I'm actually making any kind of sense over here. Let's talk about the Paris Climate Treaty, Donald Trump, the backlash against him. And as you know, there are all these global warming cultists are out there screaming it's the end of the world. CNN actually had a graphic say all these horrible things are going to happen if Trump pulls out of the Paris Climate Treaty. And you need to understand the Paris Climate Treaty really didn't actually address global warming or climate change or whatever they want to call it this week. It was an economic treaty that the countries that were supposedly guilty of poisoning the earth with carbon dioxide would take money away from their taxpayers and send it to countries that were less developed. That's really what it was all about. And it was never actually ratified by the Senate, so it was not in effect. Pulling out of it doesn't change a thing. Now we're starting to see politicians come on out from around the world and saying, yeah, Trump was right to pull out, because basically this Paris Climate Treaty was essentially blackmail. It was extorting money under the threat of denouncing a country as being a polluter and a threat to planet Earth. So more and more people are speaking out saying, yeah, this was a hoax. It was a hoax. There is still huge, abnormally large piles of snow up on Trail Ridge Road in the Rocky Mountain National Park. And yes, it's 11,000 feet, but still, this is June, and normally by June, all the snow is gone there. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog. The Climate Accord was about banks, corporations, and bringing the third world nations and the U.S. to the same levels. See, that's what the real goal is by the globalists. They have to bring us all down to the same squalor, the same poverty, the same low standard of living so that they can drop the borders and not have a panic of people rushing from poorer areas to richer areas like we're already seeing with the refugees going into Europe and the United States. They want us all to be equally dirt poor so that they can feel incredibly, incredibly rich. I mean, the guy who started the Weather Channel is saying this is all a hoax. This is part of the globalist agenda. Al Gore has actually admitted the Paris Accord wouldn't actually solve the issue of climate change. It's just about moving money around. Margaret Thatcher actually said global warming provides a marvelous excuse for global socialism. Apparently, let's see, unusual hailstorms, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I'm going to let that go. Now, this is a bizarre story, and I'm not sure what they're thinking here. This came out of governmentslaves.com. And they're actually talking about scientists are researching a vaccine against skepticism. Now, this is reported by Vox originally. And scientists are testing a vaccine to inoculate people so that they're mentally incapable of skepticism. And this is being promoted in the context of being able to get people to stop denying global warming. But, of course, if they actually had something like that, they're not going to stop with global warming. They're going to be, we're already in a world where vaccines are mandatory. Oh, you got to have your skepticism vaccine. Now just sit there, let it take effect, and we'll tell you why your children have to go off to war now. Boy, the used car dealers are going to want this stuff. It's amazing. It's amazing. We're beyond Brave New World in 1984 with it. Now, as you know, Theresa May, who earlier in her political career campaigned against government surveillance and champion of privacy and so forth. She's now out there with her call for a whole brand new internet that is built to allow government control and regulation. And a lot of people are saying, first of all, it's a knee-jerk response. It's not going to have any effect on terror whatsoever. And now, of course, the tech world is angry with her because they're talking about basically taking the internet away from the companies that have built it and operate it and give it to some government agency someplace. And it basically shows that Theresa May, like so many other world leaders, is now realizing that in the age of the internet and the independent media, they cannot lie to their people effectively any longer. And because lying to their people is how they get stuff done, that is a major threat to their continued power and dominance over you. And again, if you've ever read my article, Of the Liars, By the Liars, and For the Liars, rulers lying to their people, there's nothing new. It's business as usual. It's been going on for thousands of years. Now, we're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're still not able to take phone calls. But we're talking about rulers who lie to their people. If you ever get a chance to visit Egypt, and you will see all these temples put up by Ramses the Great, and many of them are decorated with these tableaus of Ramses' victory over the Hittites at Kadesh. And it was so effective, that was the accepted version of history for a long, long time, that Ramses defeated the Hittites. Then archaeologists up at Kadesh found evidence that Ramses got lured into a trap by some Hittite spies, almost lost his army, and had to sign history's first known instance of a non-aggression pact. And then Ramses went back to Egypt, and knowing that the ordinary Egyptian people would never get up to Kadesh and find out what actually happened, he just used his temples, like the ancient Egyptian version of CNN, and just plastered on up there. We were victorious. We were great. We were wonderful. So rulers lie to their people. It's been going on for thousands of years. It's part of their toolkit. And if there's one thing that the internet and the independent media have done, is to take that tool away from them or seriously reduce its effectiveness. And now they're getting worried. They're trying to find out how can they take the internet away or shut it down or control it without violating all of their laws about freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And it is a bit of a conundrum, because the cat is out of the bag. Every attempt at filtering or blocking the internet has failed, because people who want to know the truth find ways around the blocks. So that's why Theresa May is saying it's time for a new internet that's designed and built to allow the government to block certain people, certain things. One idea that's been floating around here is they want to license webmasters. And the license will be hideously expensive so that only companies that are selling things will have enough money to have a website. Truth activists, patriots who don't have any funding, no, you can't afford the license. I'm sorry, you're not allowed to have a web page anymore. It's the new rule for the children to fight terror, whatever. Now, there is this malware that's going around. It's been tracked back to China. And at the moment, it seems to be set up to create botnets of click bots to basically cheat advertisers. Remember, we heard a couple of months ago where certain American corporate media outlets were using these Chinese botnets to generate clicks on their own website in order to inflate their ad revenues. And this new malware, it's called Fireball, was found by researchers at Checkpoint Security. And its current purpose is to hijack web traffic to generate fraudulent ad revenue. But it also includes remote control features that allow it to download more malware in the future. And apparently, it is estimated this particular malware has infected 250 million devices around the world. If somebody could gain control of that and weaponize it, they could shut down the entire internet. And we have talked many times in the past about a virtual 911. where the internet gets shut down and the government blames those evil Russian hackers or those evil Iranian hackers or those evil Chinese hackers or those North Korean hackers. And they go off to war, and at the same time they don't have to worry about those pesky Americans sending messages to each other expressing their doubt about the official story. We are dealing with some very desperate people. The promoters of the New World Order, the global government, the global war, they have spent years working on their plans. They've spent billions, if not trillions of dollars. They're not going to give up. And we need to be ready for everything that they're going to do. Now, apparently, SD1 company Peplink has patched its load balancing routers. Apparently, a German company found more issues with that. It's an out-of-control problem between the cybercrime, the malware, just hoaxsters, and we're seeing a decline in the quality of computers and especially software. Now, the computer chips are getting better and better. They don't last as long as they used to. The design lifespan for a desktop computer now is 5 years. Same thing. I think cell phones are supposed to be 3 years. My little VIC-20 from the 80s is still working. Speaking of cell phones, article that came out of the Register in Great Britain is saying that Apple is giving the world not much new actually. Apparently the latest iPad, Mac, iOS, and Mac OS are described as minimalist makeovers, where Apple is being iterative, but not really all that innovative. And of course, we do need to understand that Apple's revenues are not performing the way they used to because people are hanging on to their devices. Apple made its fortune at a time when the economy was doing well enough where everybody felt they could get the latest and greatest. Yes, I've got an iPhone 6. I want the new iPhone 7. They don't do that anymore. People are hanging on to whatever they're using until it actually really does wear on out. And only then will they get the least expensive replacement for it. I'm not going to buy an iPhone 7. The iPhone 6 is on sale. And that sort of thing. So that limits the amount of money Apple is getting to pour into innovation. In this economy, innovation isn't a selling point. If I'm getting my phone calls and my mail and a little bit of web browsing and the weather report, that's all I'm using. A lot of people bought these smartphones, loaded them up with all kinds of apps, and then realized after a couple of months of playing with it, they just weren't using them anymore. All right, now then, there's a very alarming story, and it should be an area of concern for everybody. This is from tathasta.com. It's actually been all over a couple of different media areas here. Over in Massachusetts, there was a woman who apparently sent her boyfriend dozens of text messages encouraging him to kill himself. Obviously not a very good relationship. And apparently the 18-year-old boy committed suicide. And Michelle Carter, the lady who sent the kid these messages, is charged with manslaughter. And they're just now picking the jury. And it's going to raise some interesting issues about being responsible for things that you send over text messaging or computers. My question is, was this woman on prescription antidepressants? Was the 18-year-old boy on prescription antidepressants? Because both of them are displaying what to me seems to be very bizarre behavior. And I'm greatly concerned that, again, young people who've grown up in this world, this all looks normal to them. But for people of my age, and looking back on how people behaved when I was young, we had a certain altruism, a certain care. We had an inherent ethical, moral code. And it almost seems like behavior in the United States has become so bizarre, I'm almost wondering if there really is a pharmacological component to it. when we talk at some of the things that are going on in these colleges, where they're talking about whiteness is equal to terrorism. I'm wondering how much of this is because of these chemicals that are being pumped into our bodies, and not just the prescription psychiatric medications. Watch some of those commercials for the prescription medicine on TV, because if you listen to that little disclaimer at the end that they have to put in with a very fast voice, you're starting to hear more and more about how these medications can trigger depression or bizarre behavior or even suicide. Every time I see what I consider to be bizarre behavior, I have to wonder, were these people, what medications were these people? Now, apparently there's a new bill, House Resolution 1313. It's moving through Congress right now. And basically, if it passes, and if the Senate votes it through, and Donald Trump signs it into law, it would allow companies to require you as an employee to undergo genetic testing and enroll in a mandatory vaccine program, or they will have the legal right to fire you or simply refuse to hire you in the first place. Now, right now, there's a law. It was signed in 2008. The Genetic Privacy and Non-Discrimination Act prohibits giving employers the authority to demand a genetic test, because there would be discrimination. The genetic test can show predispositions to certain illnesses that make you at high risk, and the genetic testing, the reason for the 2008 bill was health insurance companies wanted to do DNA testing, and if you had certain markers, we were going to say, well, we're going to refuse to insure you, because we know from your genes you're going to have this coming on down. So they're trying to reverse that now. This is coming from Republican Congresswoman Virginia Fox, and basically it will strip all employees of their privacy rights, even down to their DNA. They're actually calling this bill the Preserving Employee Wellness Programs Act, which is another reminder that you should never listen to the title of a bill and assume that that's what it's actually about. Now, apparently out in Los Angeles, there is a mumps outbreak among gay men. And apparently, the gay men coming down with mumps were already fully vaccinated. And we see this happening time and time again, where there'll be vaccine campaigns, then all of a sudden there's an outbreak of mumps or measles. And what does corporate media say? Oh, see, that's why you should get your vaccination. These people were already vaccinated. Well, they weren't vaccinated enough. They should have gotten 2 or 5 or 10 or 20. We know there are documented cases where the vaccines are actually causing the illness they're supposed to be preventing. In the case of live pathogen vaccines, those who are vaccinated can give the illness to those around them, which will then be seized on as another ad campaign to sell the medication. What a crazy world we live in. What a crazy time we live in. Now, apparently over in South Sudan, they had a measles vaccination campaign, and it was botched horribly. Apparently 15 young children, as young as 12 years old, died of severe sepsis toxicity. Apparently, the procedures were just not being followed. They were using one syringe for all the children. The vaccine was stored without refrigeration the entire time. 15 kids have died here. Meanwhile, over in Germany, well, actually, we're coming up here on a commercial break, and we're going to see if maybe our connection is good enough where we can allow some phone calls for the last part of the show. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go ahead and open the phone lines. It looks like our Skype problems have gone away, so if we're going to open the lines, 800-313-9443, and see if we can take a few phone calls. We are now getting word that Saudi Arabia has sent a message to Qatar saying that unless Qatar immediately goes back to being the way it was before, comes to heel, becomes obedient, that Saudi Arabia is going to launch military action against Qatar sometime within the next 24 hours. So it's on. It is definitely on. Now then, stepping on back to this reality lay winner, and with a name like that, apparently she got exposed because, not because of anything Glenn Greenwald did. Apparently she emailed The Intercept using her work computer. I mean, this thing is just fishy from top to bottom. Anyway, getting on back to the medical news here. We're talking about vaccines. And you know that there are now published reports showing that autism risk is 420% higher in vaccinated children versus non-vaccinated. The numbers are in. And still, Germany is planning to move forward with a program that will fine parents $2,800 who refuse to get their children vaccinated. And they're also saying that the children would be forbidden from going to daycare without the vaccines. It's pushing product, pushing product, pushing product. Now then, getting on back to the issue about medications making you behave bizarrely. As you know, a little while ago, professional golfer Tiger Woods was found asleep at the steering wheel of his car. And apparently the police arrested him on a DUI because he was speaking in very slow and slurred speech. And apparently his alcohol breath test was 0. They found no alcohol in his body. And Tiger Woods was saying the prescription drugs, really, they made him drive funny, and so he pulled over to get out of traffic, and he fell asleep. Now, we don't know what medications he was on, but he just underwent a back operation, which means he could have been on muscle relaxants and other painkillers. But again, watch those TV commercials for those prescription medications on TV. And listen to that disclaimer at the end. We'll listen to those things. Claire will say the cure is worse than the disease. Especially when you realize that some of these diseases, like eczema, may actually be an artifact of vaccination again. It's amazing. Now, here's a very alarming story out of the Daily Mail. And apparently this doctor has gone public saying that 2 of his patients were told to seriously consider euthanasia, doctor-assisted suicide, when their health insurance companies refused to cover their life-saving treatment. This is Dr. Brian Callister, and basically saying that, yes, this seems to be a coming thing, where the insurance companies are literally saying, well, these people are too old, they're not going to contribute to society, we have just decided we are not going to pay for their very expensive life-saving treatment, we recommend euthanasia. Boy, right out of Logan's Run. Another little story here. This is from the Daily Mail in Great Britain. And it's talking about a study where they have extracted a compound from cannabis and found it to be significantly effective in destroying cancerous tumors in leukemia. Now, the study combined existing chemotherapy with cannabinoids and had better results than chemotherapy alone. And they're saying that the findings suggest that they could lower the dose of chemotherapy and minimize its toxic side effects. The part they left out is trying the cannabis all by itself. They want to protect the medical industrial complex. Yes, you're going to buy your chemotherapy. We're not going to do as much of it because we're going to let you have the cannabis. We'll charge you more for the less chemotherapy. But that's what it's all about, protecting the money, protecting the corporations, protecting the business. We live in a world where all of our leaders view corporations as much more important than human beings. We'll be right back. And aloha America, welcome back to the show here. And following up on that breaking story we had earlier, Saudi Arabia has basically sent Qatar a list of 10 demands, which if they are not met within 24 hours, will result in a military confrontation. This could tear the whole region apart, could tear OPEC apart. This is not feeling like it was well planned out. All right, we're going to go ahead and see if phone calls are now working with our Skype. Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha, Glenn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I hope you can hear me.
I hear you just fine.
You know, I called out something else, actually, but first I wanted to say that I'm not so sure I believe your story of the skepticism vaccine. It sounds dubious to me.
It does sound to me, but, you know, I've been hearing rumblings about that for some time, and we do know that there are pharmaceutical chemicals that change the way your brain operates. There was even a story a while back where the U.S. was trying to work on some way of literally having a chemical that would tamp down religious fervor to use on the Muslims. And who knows what's really out there. And it does sound a little far-fetched, but, I mean, the idea that they're even thinking about this kind of nonsense is scary.
But you know, see, that was a joke, see.
Oh, okay.
And you were supposed to say, you will believe, you will believe.
All right, you will believe.
Yes, exactly. No, what I actually called about was you mentioned Philadelphia and banking alternatives earlier, and I thought, ironically enough, Philadelphia is the home of the Second National Bank building.
Yes.
Which is a grandiose building in Greek architectural style with columns and everything. And I had toured it in the 90s with some friends. It's operated by the National Park Service and had been a money history museum. But see, the National Museum of Money and Finance is now up in New York City. But apparently now it's just a portrait gallery of, like, notable personages. So it has like 100 portraits of a walkthrough thing. And it's right within a stone's throw of Independence Hall and Liberty Bell. Ironically enough, again, that the second bank should be in such close proximity to the Liberty Bell.
Yes.
But, yeah, so, but I don't know exactly what options. I was expecting more of the bank issue stuff to come from at the state level. I think it's North Dakota, for example, has their own highly functional independent bank, I think it is. I would like to see that stuff implemented at the state level.
Absolutely. I would like to see the things that we are required to have, you know, a currency system, clean water, food, all the basics, healthcare, should be utilities that are done to provide the service, not make money for the money junkies. Because anytime something is privatized and profitized, then obviously quality of service goes down and prices go up. And we never should have allowed our monetary system to become privatized. It was unconstitutional to do it. And we're seeing all over the world just what it's costing ordinary people to have the currency that they're required to use for commerce be a for-profit operation by a private central bank.
Yes, I agree. On my way out here, I just want to point out, Saudi Arabia keeps changing their list of demands for Qatar. Now they want a shrubbery.
All right, well, we'll have to get them a shrubbery then. All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Arthur in Massachusetts. Aloha, Arthur. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How's it going, Mike?
Going a lot better now that I can take phone calls.
Yeah, I'm a listener for about 2 years or something, and I'm very impressed with your show. And I listened to Alice Jones before that. Recently, I've had a problem with something you were talking about. I wish I could remember this guy's name. I had it written down in an email to myself, and I can't seem to find it. But it doesn't matter. It's one of your regular callers, and he was bringing up stuff about Stalin. And it doesn't matter who it is. And you know, historically what the communists did to to the people they ruled under. I mean, this is, never mind the Chinese communists, this is just the Russian communists.
Yes.
And I have discovered on the web stuff like the I'm going to try to say this right, Holodomor.
The Holodomor.
I think you say it with a guttural, sorry?
Holodomor, I believe, is the pronunciation.
Yeah, I think you say it with like a guttural R if you're from the region. It has that. And I have that as really the primary thing. That's something like 4 million people.
Yes.
That were, and it's not just the I mean, it's a method by which they were deprived of food. And the whole thing, of course, was covered up by our own Western media.
Yes.
And there's a similar crime. I mean, it's actually nothing in the numbers, but I'm just saying in the fact that it was covered up the Caton Forest massacre.
Well,
which is actually several different. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, there are all kinds of genocides throughout history which are basically marginalized in order to keep the focus on what was alleged to have happened during World War II for Israel's political gain. I mean, look how hard Israel has fought against recognition of the Armenian genocide. There was a horrible genocide in Cambodia within recent memory. But these are all just sort of sidelined here because the only genocide we're supposed to remember is the one that was supposedly perpetrated against the Jews by the Nazis.
Absolutely. No, my point is that you seem to I'll say minimize or I'm looking for another word, but you're saying that communism. I don't want to say you're saying communism is great, but that you seem to support it a little bit. You say. You were just quoting Lenin 2 days ago or something. I forget what the quote was. I was just listening to it last night. It was in the last 2 days.
Well, first of all, I'm not saying the communists were doing a good thing. In fact, they made an absolute mockery of the Marxist vision. And I've been very critical of Stalin, especially over that adventure with Lysenkoism. The Lenin quote that I used a couple of days ago, and I used it earlier on today's show, is that Lenin predicted when Western capitalism failed, it would devolve into fascism to protect the wealth and privilege of those at the top. And it was an accurate observation, and we are seeing that happen. But no, I'm not a big fan of the Soviet Union.
Okay, but I'm just not sure that. I just wanted to make sure that we're perfectly clear about what the level. Lenin himself was in. I mean, what happened under Lenin was really. I think of equal the murders on his own people. I mean, it's something else. Like the American Indian was wiped out by white people coming across this country, but it wasn't white people killing their own. I'm not trying to say that makes it okay. I mean, excuse me, that's the worst genocide of all.
Hang on. You're working from the assumption that the population of the Soviet Union was all homogenous. And no, they weren't.
Right.
The Soviet Union was built up out of small disparate groups, many of which had ancient racial animosities, and those who were in power basically carried through on that. Stalin, when he was filling up those gulags, it wasn't just automatically anybody who disagreed with him. He targeted specific ethnic groups for dispossession and removal. So I think you're oversimplifying what was going on. And I'm with you, it was all a very, very bad thing to do. But it was hardly confined to the Soviet Union. It has existed throughout history. It's just in our corporate media, the emphasis is always being put on World War II. Again, because Israel's justification for having stolen Palestine rests on that story. It's their political foundation.
No, I understand that. That's kind of been blown up like a balloon, where all this other stuff has been swept under the rug. But all I can say is, I just wanted to make sure we were straight that communism under Stalin was a horrible. It was great for some people, but for a great piece of the population, it was death. And I think he taught Hitler how to have a concentration camp. He's the guy that showed Hitler all the tricks. I mean.
Wait a minute. Yeah, you seem
maybe
to.
Maybe that's a rumor. I'm not speaking.
I think that's a rumor there because don't forget Stalin and Hitler were enemies. Hitler did invade the Soviet Union. Before
they were enemies, they were friends. Remember? And I'm not saying that I know this for a fact, but I've heard the rumor.
Okay, well, Arthur, I'm going to let you go here because you're doing a lot of guessing and bygoshing, and you don't really have a factual basis here. So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch to Brendan in San Francisco. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I'm just wondering what your take is now that we have time to look back and reflect on Glenn Greenwald and Snowden, and if they are, in fact, gatekeepers and some of the business dealings of Greenwald with eBay founder have you any thoughts on this? Have you looked into this, or because I'm hearing some things that maybe he is, not all that he's cracked up to be.
Well, I've been seeing some of these things out there. I think somebody said that WikiLeaks has actually posted some kind of a reward. Let me scroll on down to that here. And WikiLeaks offers $10,000 reward to expose the reporter. I'll have to look at that. As far as the current situation with this reality lay winner, I think Glenn Greenwald got played, and they were trying to burn him, saying that he outed his source and burned it. But now it's come on out that she made the idiotic mistake of sending this information to him using her work computer, which obviously is going to be monitored. It was a secure environment. So I don't know. I think Glenn Greenwald got played on this one. He's being used to try and grant.
Honestly, we need to keep an eye on Glenn Greenwald, and with a more critical eye. I was a big supporter of his and Jeremy Scahill, but just with time passing now, he's withheld a lot of the WikiLeaks information or the Snowden leaks, and the fact that he's in bed with eBay now is quite troubling in my opinion, but I think it's something we should keep an eye on.
Well, you should always keep an eye on everybody, including me. That's part of being a skeptical audience.
Keep an eye on you, Mike.
Yeah,
you.
Oh yeah, I've got shifty eyes here. So anyway, I would say don't get into the idea of saying you can trust this person, you can't trust that person, for two reasons. One, we can get used, we can get tricked, we can make mistakes. You should be evaluating the information you get from all sources on a case-by-case, individual basis and say, does it make sense or not? And again, I've had certain doubts about whether maybe the Snowden story was made public to scare us all into silence, and if that was the plan, it sure as heck didn't work. But again, as far as the current situation, I think this reality lay winner was an attempt at a psyop to leak out this NSA document, which doesn't really prove anything. It's just more allegations. But leak it out in a way where people would say, oh, if it's being leaked, it must be true. No, it isn't. It's just another psyop. Okay?
If you see it on corporate media, I think you just have to assume that it's exactly the opposite of what they're saying.
Well, she's getting a lot of coverage.
My default.
I mean, they're really pounding on the coverage. I mean, she's, every hourly cycle they're doing the story about how she's going to be charged with espionage for sending out this information, and maybe they're trying to issue a warning for other people working for the government to mind their own business. But when you look at how dumb she was, first of all, I mean, the lady seems to be a little have some issues, and then to use her own work computer to send out the emails, that shows a lack of forethought. And again, it smells funny. It really does. Anyway, Brendan, going to let you go.
She's been hanging out with the Clinton crew, I guess. Thanks, Mike.
Apparently, she was a Bernie Sanders supporter, but again, the story just feels dodgy to me. And again, there is nothing in this NSA document that actually has any evidence whatsoever. In fact, apparently. Last Sunday, Mark Warner of Virginia, who's the vice chair of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, said still there is no smoking gun evidence on collusion between President Trump and Russian officials. They have been investigating for a year. They have found nothing, 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 nothing. Okay? Meanwhile, there's all this evidence. There's all this evidence of collusion between Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Russia. There's the Uranium One deal, and nobody wants to go near it. This lady has the blackmail goods on the entire government. They are absolutely scared of her.
Yeah, and, just to kind of bring it all back around, there's a total information overload. And there's a gentleman that wrote an article saying, at some point we just shut off because there's so much every day. And I try to keep up with it, but man, oh man, I need a break. But it's just nonstop garbage, and my filter just gets clogged, and I'm like, I just want to shut it off. But I think that's where I'm at. But and again, thanks, Mike. I'll let you go.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Joe in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I work a lot, so I'm out of the loop on a lot of things. I wanted to ask you a question about What's going on with, remember the Glass-Steagall firewall that separated the banks, investment banks, from blah, 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 or whatever? What's been going on with that lately? Has there been any progress in that?
No, there's been a lot of talk about it. There's a lot of talk about new regulatory reform. Wall Street is still lobbying as far as they can for the chains to be kept off. And it is rather absurd to see these same banks that are paying these huge settlements when they get caught laundering drug money or cheating mortgage holders or all the rest of it, and then they turn around and say, we don't need new regulation. We're fine just the way we are. Again, getting Wall Street under control was one of the issues that Donald Trump campaigned on. We would certainly like to see it happen. We do need to have Glass-Steagall brought back so that these Wall Street money junkies, if they want to play these high-risk gambles, they're using their own money. And Glass-Steagall was passed in the wake of the Depression of the 1930s because what really allowed the crash of 29 to get out of control was that these banks were using their customers' savings money to try and prop up their failed positions, and then they lost it all. And that's why Glass-Steagall was passed. But unfortunately, it was rescinded, repealed in the 1990s. And the banks went back to playing the same high-risk venture with depositor money, and that's when the mortgage-backed security fraud collapsed. The damage was everywhere.
Yeah, I went over to a federal, credit union here locally. I got out of the big investment banks for that reason. And one more thing, just to let you go. I sent you an email about Putin and the edited out comments about.
All right, I'll take a look for that. We have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and last segment of our program today. Boy, there is so much going on. I identify with that last caller was just saying the information. There's so much overload. And you do have to pick and choose. And we do that here. We make an arbitrary decision, what we think is important for people to be knowing about the war zones and so forth. And we can't cover it all. We do try and cover as much as we can, especially at the website. We cannot cover it all. There is too much going on. But right now, I think it is very important that we keep an eye on all these war zones all over the world, because we're just poised on the brink of a major, major escalation in global conflict. All it's going to take is one hot-headed decision, one stupid mistake, and it's going to be off and running. And I'm very alarmed at the situation involving Saudi Arabia and Qatar. This could literally break up the entire Middle East politically. They've sort of been operating as a single unit through OPEC, through the Organization of Gulf States. That could all fracture, and they would go back to being individual countries making war on each other. And it would just escalate and spread from there. By the way, I did find that email that was sent to me, and it's the interview that Megyn Kelly did with Vladimir Putin with the parts that NBC took out. And they took it out in order to weaken Putin's presentation. Putin was out there saying, basically, it's the U.S. that's meddling in everybody else's election. It's the U.S. that's intervening in all these countries. And it's absolutely true. The U.S. government is behaving badly. It's time to accept that. It's time to send a message to the world. We, the people of the United States of America, do not support what the U.S. government is doing in our name. We're tired of the lies. We're tired of war. We're tired of being plundered and pillaged by every corporation out there with a high-paid lobbyist in Washington, D.C. You will buy the vaccines. You will buy this. You will do that. You won't collect rain on your own property. You will buy bottled water. Again, we're coming up on Independence Day. It's time to start thinking why it was named that and looking at the actual circumstances that led to the American Revolution. And no, it wasn't tea in Boston Harbor. The issues were far more widespread than that. It was the enforced dependency colonial that was imposed on the colonists. They were ordered whose currency they had to use. They were ordered what businesses they had to do business with. They were forced to be dependent on favored British businesses and institutions, and dependency is slavery. some point, slaves stand up and say, enough is enough. So just something for you to think about. Last story before we hit the end of the show. For some reason, Texas has the highest maternal mortality rate in the entire developed world. Apparently, the rate of pregnancy-related deaths is skyrocketing down there, and nobody's really sure why. It's the highest in the U.S. and in the developed world. Something's gone wrong with our medical-industrial complex. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here, get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, Hump Day, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller's show today, and especially on Thursday, when we're going to have the USS Liberty survivor guest hosting the program. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.